all, thank you for having me. Delighted to be here. So I have had a very non-linear career path and started in textile design, actually. But I suppose there was a connection from the start because my thesis at university was actually on eco-textiles. This is a long time ago,
Really?
back in the 90s. So yeah, focused on natural fibers and materials in interior design. Little did I know that many years later I would end up working for IKEA in home furnishings, of course. But yeah, so many years as a designer in New Zealand and Australia, although you can tell my accent's British. I've spent quite a lot of time down under and really enjoyed living in both countries. And as I worked in textiles, I really liked, I took the learnings from my thesis, really liked focusing on natural materials such as linen, wool, and even silk and cashmere sometimes, depending on the brand I was working for, and really looking at the fact that they were renewable and regenerative and so on. And then after many years of working for different companies, worked for Nike in sportswear and was part of their Better World sourcing strategy when it just began.
Right.
That was a long time ago.
Yes.
So I was based in Melbourne in Collingwood, and then moved to a global role, looking after elite athletes. And we were the first brand to bring the recycled synthetic kit into the football arena for the 2010 Football World Cup.
Yeah.
And then from there, various roles, moved into quality in IKEA. I've been at IKEA for 10 years now.
Right.
And we have what we call democratic design, which is all about bringing all elements of design to life in every product that we create. And it always has to be for a great low price, but it has form, function, quality, and sustainability. And for me, quality and sustainability really go hand in hand. You get the product right choice of materials, right design, reduce waste, the product lasts for longer, it's more sustainable. And then from that role, moved into heading up sustainability. Wow. So I don't come from a traditional sustainability background, but I have.
But do any of us?
Well, they're true. What is a traditional one? And I have many specialists in my team who are experts on human rights law or climate and circular and so on.
Which prompts a question before we get to Renee, because it'll also impact Renee. Where does sustainability fit in an org structure of IKEA?
Yeah, so for us, we take it really seriously. It's been part of our DNA from the start. The creation of flat pack to make sure that we didn't ship air, and those days it was more about saving money and so on. But of course, when you look at it through the sustainability lens, it's also better for sustainability. So we've had a strategy for decades. And we have it at the senior level of leadership. So I sit in what is called group management, reporting into the CFO and working very closely with our CEO. And we also have made all our country managers chief sustainability officers as well, because we take it really seriously. And then the overall sustainability strategy is one of the strategic strategies for IKEA that sits along with our commercial strategies and other business strategies. So it's taken really seriously and has very high level of governance.
Okay, and we'll get to the manifestation or how that works its way through the business very soon. So Renee, you're here in Australia. Tell us more about your role here.
Yeah, so my journey at the beginning of my career actually started in hospitality, which was what led me to IKEA. I actually started IKEA in their food operations, and then I went into over a decade of leading the retail operations in the Queensland market, where you're not only responsible for the success and the growth of the business, but also the implementation and the delivery of the sustainability strategy. So that fueled my passion for sustainability, which then led me into the role, which I feel very fortunate now to be in, where I have the ability to enable the strategy, identify opportunities, and set the pace within our markets to deliver the sustainability strategy, but also growing the success of our business.
Yeah, right. Okay. Queensland. Okay. Sorry, that's from a New South Wales.
We won't get into state rivalry.
We won't get into state rivalry. It just doesn't work. And we always lose the football anyway. So
at least you're aware of this.
Yes, indeed. All right, let's talk about leadership and IKEA's in particular. It is true to say that IKEA is seen amongst a handful of companies as showing profound leadership on not sustainability per se, but the role of sustainable development in the strategic, the risk management, the operational and supply function operations of that particular business enterprise. So in Australia, interestingly, you've had this really important renewable energy project that's been going on now for some time. We were part of the launch of it, I seem to recall, a few years ago. Let's go back to Renee and ask the question, could you give us an overview, firstly, of its strategy here in Australia, and then we'll move broadly back to Karen on global.
Are you speaking specifically to the strategy?
To the strategy of renewable energy project.
Yeah, well, it actually started way back in 2014, where we committed to actually investing in renewable energy. We saw it as the way forward. So
let's pause. Pre-Paris Agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Yes.
So yes, we were ahead of the curve there. And since 2014, we've invested in heavily invested in a significant amount of solar panels on our units for on-site generation. We now have over 26,000 solar panels in Australia, generating 8.8 megawatts of energy.
That beats my 13 on that.
Yes. So it's been a commitment for us. And of course, it was very nice to have you there with us yesterday when we actually launched the opening of our solar panels on our distribution centre in Marsden Park. Yeah, where we've used our expansive rooftop and covered nearly 9,000 square metres of it with 4,000 solar panels. But then also put in a 1 megawatt battery so that when we're not generating power, we still have the ability to use that power. And we've taken our on-site generation now from 26% of our usage to 70% of our usage.
In what period?
This project implementation.
Over the life of the project. Right.
This is what we will shift from 26 to 70.
Wow.
Once she's all operating and the battery's in place.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
It is amazing to have seen. Yes. And you can only see, well, you could see it either by going onto the roof, which is Andrew and his, what is it? Agoraphobia? What's the expression? Heights.
I don't know what the height phobia
What's
is.
a height phobia? Can't do. But they had a drone.
Yeah.
They had a drone that could show you when it is amazing. So what does that translate to globally? Australia, for all of its perceived importance in the world, is a little bit off Broadway for a lot of business, not necessarily for IKEA and others. But what does it mean globally for those kinds of projects to be done in a country like Australia for the global strategic intent of IKEA, particularly on renewables?
Yeah. Well, firstly, it was great to be there yesterday and be part of the launch of that. It's fantastic, pioneering. And if there's any country where you can put solar panels, I would say Australia ranks pretty highly there. So it's fantastic. We're making the most of that, as well as wind and so on as well. And as you mentioned, we started already here and in other countries pre-Paris Agreement. I mentioned earlier that we have had sustainability sort of embedded in our DNA, and it is one of our values to care for people and planet, and we take those values seriously at IKEA. And then the overall strategy, of course, covers climate, and it's really important because that's an existential challenge that we're all working with around the world. But it also covers circularity, it covers our human rights and social impact work, and it covers what we call healthy and sustainable living, which is our offer to our customers to make sure we help them to make better choices. So we have all of that covered in the strategy. And then if you take just the climate element, we do both a bottom up and a top down approach. So we have signed the Paris Agreement. We have got science-based targets aligned with the SBTi organization. We got that approved last year, our revised targets. We've had it for many years, but we did the revision based on new science last year. And that then, of course, many of the listeners will know, then gives you lots of emission categories to work on.
Yes.
So one thing is getting the goals signed off, but the other is actually then delivering on those goals by 2030. We need to halve our emissions by then. And that's across scope 1, 2, and 3 without any offsets. So that's a big focus from my global team.
So the SBTi target has no offsets.
We've decided to do it without any offsets within IKEA and Ingka Group. So that's
been quite an issue.
Exactly. So we've chosen to sort of take that stand. And I know there's lots of discussion about whether we should or should not. And some people believe it will help speed up the transition to renewables and clean energy and so on if we do allow it. But it's just a personal choice for us as a brand to move forward without that. And we're following the progress of the discussions. So basically, of course, having the goals signed off is like, woohoo, but that's, as you will all know, not the end of it. Yes, that's the start of it.
Is the heart.
So although we've been working on it for many, many years, we now have, you know, the closer you get to 2030, the sharper you have to be.
Mm-hmm.
So we've just launched our transition plan, which is publicly available. You can
Mhm.
see it on Ingka.com, and there it goes through all the emission categories and the plans we have behind it. We definitely don't have all the answers, and we will evolve the transition plan over time, and we absolutely have to collaborate with others and learn from others. But then we set those global emission category targets globally. We have goal letters that go out to all the country managers who are also CSOs.
Right.
And then Renee, of course, works very closely with Mira,
Yep.
our CEO and CSO here,
Yep.
and of course the rest of the business to deliver on those goals. And then, but it's not just a top-down pushing numbers down to the countries. It's a two-way conversation, because if you know there's the political will, or there's new innovation or new investments coming in, then you might be able to exceed the goal. Or if you know there's challenges and winds are against you, you might not. So it's our job in global to balance it across all our markets. And then the biggest chunk of climate for overall, if you include scope 3, is in our products.
Yes.
So IKEA, who work on the design and development of our range, they're working really hard on to switch all the materials to renewable or recycled materials, because that's 50% of our emissions. So we work really closely with
Well,
them.
I reckon that's a whole exchange conversation in itself.
Yeah, exactly.
And we need a few hours to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Go
We
through
could
that
definitely talk
that
several
little
hours on
stuff
that
at the
one.
moment. So that's interesting, Karen, about the way it percolates, infiltrates, inculcates into country action. Renee, how, from your perspective, does that work for you? What is it that you do, take, share, learn from what's going on at Group? And the reason I asked that question is yesterday we had the manager of the warehouse actually give the presentation, and she was right on point about what the targets were. She knew exactly what the mission of the organisation was, and that's a very rare thing in a business of this size, for a person in that role in another country to be talking about what is the strategic intent of a global organisation. Really is fascinating. So how does it work here?
I think what it shows you is that what Karen spoke to before, where we have a vision, and it's to create the better everyday life for the many. And the bedrock of that is our culture and values. And with that, it's about caring for people and planet.
Right.
So that is right across our business. And I believe that the sustainability strategy is integrated completely within our business. So for you to have the distribution centre manager speak on the climate goals for that centre, I think is absolutely appropriate and right. And I believe that most of our units would do the same. They're given climate goals, that there's expectations for them to meet energy, water, waste, climate footprint, but also social goals. How are they changing? What influence are they having in society, and what impact as well? So it's not just me speaking to it. We have a strategy that then, myself and my team work on setting the pace, enabling the initiatives, but also inspiring them to deliver on the goals that they're given.
Okay.
It's definitely a topic at the table in board discussions and meetings with the units.
And how, in broad terms, do you measure that performance, both here and then globally?
Locally, we have set goals. So we have efficiency goals that we're chasing. We have recycling rates that we're chasing, water usage. We have social impact measures. We have change maker goals. And we work with the units quite closely in delivering on those.
And so data collection becomes critical.
Absolutely.
As a result of that. Yeah.
And I feel very fortunate in IKEA that we're quite advanced in that space.
Right. Okay. So let's go in the helicopter and go to global. Karen, how do you aggregate all of this information?
We've got a very smart team. The performance team, led by someone in my management team, is absolutely brilliant. But actually, it's not just the sustainability performance team working on this. This is everybody in the units. The accuracy of, you need good stuff in to get good stuff out. Quite a bit of it is still manual, but a lot of it is getting more and more automated. We have a system called Sustain that we work with, and more across the whole value chain, we're automating that data. And we see, this is where I actually see the power of AI and digitalization and technology as being a massive advantage, because it will also allow us to do carbon forecasting in the future as well, doing, using algorithms to really map how we can, what levers we press. If you do this, then it's a bigger benefit than this. So you can get bogged down with chasing the tail, and we need to look at what the big impact things are, the big actions. And for us, renewable heating and cooling, switching to renewable electricity, we're over 90% globally on renewable electricity. We need to switch to renewable heating and cooling. And then we have zero emission deliveries, which we saw yesterday in the visit as well, with the lovely trucks that we've got here. So all those things that we know where the big impact actions are, and that can help focus. And then we report on it fully transparently in the annual report, and we talk about what is going well, but also, just as important, what's not going well and what we need to learn from others. But that's a holistic view, and it includes our work with refugees, skills for employment, what we're doing with plant-based meals as well.
That was an interesting conversation yesterday.
Yeah, I mean,
into that.
We're a furniture company. Everybody knows us as a furniture company, but we're also one of the largest restaurants in the world. I think there's over 650 meals served in our restaurants last year. And of course, everybody
Your salmon is almost as good as mine.
Yeah.
Can I say?
That's good. I love it too. And everyone loves our meatballs. And of course, but we have plant balls.
No, my daughter likes the vegetables.
Good. I'm glad.
She likes the vegetables.
And of course, it's not about making people feel guilty about eating meat or anything. It's about, but the biggest impact an individual can have is actually to eat less red meat and to reduce their food waste. So if we can help with just 2 or 3 meals a week that are less red meat, even Johan Rockström, which many of the listeners might know, with the 9 planetary boundaries, when you ask him, he says, you don't have to be vegan, you don't have to be purist, just eat less red meat, and then reduce your food waste as well. So we want to help with that, both educating, nudging. We make the plant-based options a lower price than the meat alternative to make it more affordable as well. So I think that element, we've not really touched on that yet, but we talked a lot about our own operations. But for us, with our size, scale and reach that we have, both in Australia and worldwide, we can help customers to make sustainability affordable, because we're only going to be sustainable around the world if everybody can afford
Well, it's interesting you raised that, because what struck me was the optionality.
Yes,
that you are providing a range of different, in the same way as the furniture has different options. You're providing that in other areas as well, of a sustainable lifestyle, without putting that badge necessarily attached to it. And goes back to your comment you made, Renee, around values, that it is inculcated into the way in which IKEA just does it. That then manifests itself to the question of, well, where's the buck in doing this? And there was a brilliant slide yesterday, which we will get to, which talked about this notion of sustainability and revenue growth. And there were 2 different slides, and we'll talk about Australia first, and then we'll talk global. And we'll go to Renee about that, because it said, and I quote, IKEA has achieved an 89% reduction in emissions since FY16, while increasing revenue by 68%. So the question to both of you is, what's the key to making sustainability and profitability work together? So firstly, Australia, amazing result.
We're very, very proud of that. I mean, an 89% reduction is staggering.
Not to be sneezed at.
Yes, absolutely. And it wasn't done easily either. It took a lot of focus, and it took long-term thinking. So we already shared that it was 2014 when we started looking at renewable energy solutions. And over that time, we have heavily invested in on-site generation. We've also renewable heating and cooling, but also the efficiency of our buildings. Reducing the waste that we send to landfill, and then of course the investment or procurement of energy certificates, but understanding that longer term also, this does build brand trust. You need to be meeting the consumer in their expectations, and there's younger generations coming through, and they expect to inherit a good planet. So you have to have that longer foresight.
How do you measure that customer satisfaction? I mean, at the end of the day, it's the money in the till that tells you that they're satisfied. But are there also other measures that you gain? Do you survey? Do you do run campaigns? So I'm aware of that. The human rights one was a rather important one in Australia, actually. But how do you measure that kind of customer interest
Yeah.
in what you're doing?
In our comms and public affairs team, we do measure brand trust.
Yeah, right.
And we've also now managed with their business navigation team, their finance team, to correlate brand trust with sales, increase in sales. And of course, brand trust is broad and it can be many topics like being satisfied with your delivery and that we've got things in stock and so on as well. But a big part of the trust is that we are a reputable, purpose-led brand that people believe in, trust that we treat our co-workers well, co-workers in the whole supply chain well, and that we're caring for the planet as well. So the whole people and planet agenda. We also see it's great for attracting and retaining talent. And that saves money too. If you get great people in who are loyal and want to work for us and really see us as a credible
churn rate
option.
goes down.
Yeah, exactly. So if you reduce your turnover, everybody knows who works in retail or any company actually, if you have to keep reinvesting with new co-workers to upskill them, there's a cost to that, as well as the lost expertise and knowledge and support for customers. There's a financial cost attached to that. So yeah, co-worker retention is super important. And then it just makes good business sense. Going forward, we will have, you know, we have to build in resilience. We have to look after our supply chain. We're dependent on nature, biodiversity, and so on. So it's in our best interest to protect them from a purely business point of view, even if you don't think of the fact it's the right thing to do. So as well as customers wanting, you know, getting higher loyalty and therefore more sales and more share of the pie, it actually makes just good business sense financially from an operations point of view. And when we had the energy crisis in Europe a couple of years ago, after the start of the war in Ukraine, most of our stores that had the solar panels on the roof achieved profitability because of those solar panels. If they hadn't had them, they would have not been profitable because there was such fluctuation and higher energy prices.
Not to mention the energy and economic resilience that you create as a result of not necessarily relying on northern hemisphere gas.
Yes, exactly. So it was a huge improvement. So it just on all levels makes good business sense. And then, as I mentioned before, you know, we feel that sustainability and affordability go hand in hand. We don't think customers should have to pay more for sustainable products. So if we can get that across to our customers so that we side with them, we want to look after their wallets, the what's in it for them is that it saves them money, saves them waste, water, lower energy costs, lower water bills, and so on. So that's also really attractive to customers today. They really have to look after their hard-earned money. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because I agree with you. I don't think customer wants to have to pay for the greenium.
No. Yeah, I like that green premium.
Right? So-called green premium.
Yeah.
No, because if you actually put the actual cost of the thing that you're bringing to market, it will actually be more.
Yeah.
Because you don't bring the true cost of what it takes to bring it to market in the first place.
Yeah.
Having said that, Australia outperformed, did very well. Yay, Australia. Well done, Renee. It's all Renee. Got nothing to do with the CEO. How did it?
Don't tell it.
This is only going to be the three of us. Nobody else will know. How did global go?
Well, we're probably comparing apples with pears.
Okay.
But first of all, big kudos to Australia because they are really leading the way there. So I think that's fantastic. So we definitely want other countries to catch up to quite a lot of the work Australia are doing. So you are definitely leading the way there. But when we measure, we do scopes 1, 2, and 3. And as I mentioned before, no offsetting as well. So we have, since the baseline 2016, same baseline, 30.1% reduction in CO2 emissions across all 3 scopes. And a 23.7 increase in revenue over that time.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
It's pretty bad. But it's about showing, because it's also, of course, we publish that and everyone can see, but it's about showing that it is possible to be profitable, to grow, to have better revenue, and still decouple and lower the emissions. And that we want to lead the way. This is where competition doesn't really work. Collaboration works. So we're very much about sharing what we're doing, helping others to learn so they can also do that.
Well, let's talk partnerships because you've got a very strong partnership in Australia with ANC in relation to the electric trucks. They've been there since .1. I remember when that was launched, and the comment I made at the time, and I suspect it's the one that's going to actually be even more important, because this is the way I think about things, is that drivers are going to love them because they're quiet.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
They don't sit on an engine
Yeah.
anymore, and therefore they're not listening to the thrum and the hub and the
Yeah.
vibration. And that goes to the issue of occupational health and
Yeah.
safety, apart
Yeah.
from anything else. What's the secret sauce of a good partnership for IKEA?
I think it is, one, we check that their values aligned.
Yeah.
And that they're also trying to head towards the same goals. We're very clear with where we're heading, so we check that they're aligned with that. And we are, at the end of the day, a home furnishing retailer, so we try not to be the expert in all fields. A good example was even yesterday, where the partnership is with Smart Commercial Solar, where we got them on as a partnership to design and implement the solar panels. There's many examples. If we talk about the refugee workforce inclusion project here in Australia, which has been extremely successful, whereby we have a partnership with a company called Community Corporate, and they actually help us to identify participants in this program where they can come and participate in the program in IKEA, where they're upskilled to either take a role within IKEA, or they're given the skills to find meaningful employment outside of IKEA.
Right.
But again, we partnered with an agency that is experts in this space. So it's knowing when we need to step away and let someone who's better at doing that to step in.
And so
help us.
just before we get to Karen looking at that globally, it's interesting because you look at it and go, why is a retailer talking about human rights and refugees and the issue of migration? It's a difficult one. It's highly problematic for some in some countries to talk about, both community and company. And I don't want to unpick why IKEA does that, but what's the reaction by customers been to that kind of initiative?
Oh, it's extremely positive.
Right.
I think that we do stand by wanting to champion human rights, and that everyone is equal. And I think an initiative as that actually just stands us right on the forefront of saying this is what we stand for, and this is what we're going to do. And if you want to align with a business that aligns with your personal values, then we're here for that.
Yeah, and I think that's so. How does that then manifest itself globally? Because you could pick an electric truckload of issues. But there's only so many that you can go into. And let's get to the question of 2025 more broadly. It's been an interesting start to a year, ladies and jellybirds, whether it's the United States and the geopolitical manifestations of what's going on in the White House there. We still have an unresolved war in Ukraine and Russia. We have difficulty in the Middle East in relation to what's going on with Gaza and Israel. There are a lot of pockets which are called hotspots, and there is also a permeating concern in relation to the efficacy or the long-termedness, which is interesting, around ESG, which is all about long-termedness, but we'll move on. So what does the sustainability leader need to focus on in 2025? What are you focusing on? What are you going to be focusing on? Not broadly, not in terms of detailed campaigns.
First of all, when you ask why, just very briefly, we can't have a vision that says to create a better everyday life for the many people and then not side with the many and not want to improve the planet for everybody, because there won't be a better everyday life in the future if we don't play our part. Secondly, we're one of the most trusted and biggest recognised brands in the world. So we want to use our size and scale to be a voice for others and be a force for good. So when it comes to partnerships, the more global level, it's with UNHCR on the refugees. And with that commitment that we've made with them, we've brought 500 other brands along with us because they see IKEA doing it. So we provide our service and the support on a local level, and it's been so empowering and wonderful. And I've spoken to a lot of people who've been through the program, but on a global level, it's the fact that we bring others along with us and that we use that size and scale. And then we have collaborations with WBCSD and partnership there, and particularly on the circularity protocol, but also on others. We have partnerships with WEF, with the UN Global Compact, and many others. So we try to get to the forums where we can say there's a role for business, there's a role for governments, there's a role for NGOs and society at large. And all of us need to play our part to move together. The other thing is we're set up as a foundation. So of course we're still a business, a profitable business, but all our money either goes into the business or it goes to the IKEA Foundation.
Right.
And then that's our charitable arm, totally separate business. And they can also invest and work with partnerships to support when there's earthquakes, famine, floods in various places, the war in Ukraine, donating goods and services and money as well. So I think the partnerships for us go beyond the political year cycles of 3 or 4 years. We think in generations. We don't have short-term shareholders breathing down our neck. So we can think beyond the political sort of, sine curve that goes up and down like a yo-yo, which is a big advantage for us. So yes, we see, of course, political headwinds going on, and we see trade wars as well as what other things, and we see polarization and misinformation. So, but what we want to do is stay true to our values, true to what we believe in. We always we don't want polarization, so we don't try and take sides. We try and collaborate and work with everybody. And even if perhaps in the US they don't want to talk about climate anymore, if it still makes good financial sense to have renewables, they'll have renewables.
Yes.
And they are going to carry on investing because it makes good financial sense. So it's talking the same language as people, talking business language, talking the benefits that matter to them is super important. So for me, that's what I'm really focused on. And then I also think it's our job to bring optimism and agency to people, because there's a lot of eco-anxiety. We know when we survey our customers, so many people around the world worry about climate change. Many of them want to act, but they want to see everybody else, businesses and politicians, acting too. And they also don't want to pay for it separately. We have talked about that. But it is our job to be that optimistic, and because many of the solutions exist.
Yes.
So we want to keep fighting. We have an investment arm with a portfolio in renewables of 7.5 billion by 2030. We've spent about 4.2 billion of that now, including some in Australia. And we have a 1 billion circular portfolio as well. We could probably do a separate exchange on circular.
About that.
We could dive deeper into a whole circular topic.
Yes.
But yeah, plenty of things to be optimistic about and drive solutions to keep that action-minded solution approach to everything.
So that translates to Australia, which is, to be fair to it, perhaps not as tensioned, if I can put it that way, at the moment in relation to what's going on in the global north, at least in some parts. But it does have a ripple effect into Australia. And then we've got our own issues. So we've just gone through a cyclone that was out of session. It shouldn't have happened. And it came into a part of Australia that it should not have. So we're confused as to, is this climate change or is it just a freak event? But it has an enormous impact upon community. It has obviously an impact on supply chain. What's 25 looking like for you and your team in relation to the big issues?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you can see, we're well supported. We have a very clear direction from global. For myself and the team, I think first and foremost, you have to understand what the consumer is feeling today and what's their expectations. We touched on it a little bit earlier about them not wanting to pay for it. And also, but they actually want to make a difference. And we do see that. So how do we meet them there and help, change behavior in society and enable a more healthy and sustainable life? But also, Karen mentioned speaking the different languages. So we have mandatory reporting looming in Australia, and I choose an optimistic view on this one because I think it will bring us lots of opportunity. It will enable sustainability people to walk to the table with evidence to say this
That's a good point.
is actually what will happen if we do it, but even better, what happens if we don't? So see this as an opportunity coming across the table and know which audience you're talking to. I often talk about how often I will go from a conversation about solar panels to then the next conversations about refugees.
Yes.
The audiences are completely different.
Yes.
So I can't use the same language really when I'm taking these different conversations. So knowing the audience before you go in and how do you inspire those people? It's the what's in it for me. And then, I mean, I'm extremely excited that I'm a part of IKEA because our reach and influence is big. So personally, I feel excited that we can make a difference and use that reach and influence. But I also think, Karen's also mentioned less meat and less waste. I think we can influence that. And I think the message out there, it is a lot better for all of us to do a little bit, and we can
Yes.
do this.
Mm.
Whereas a few people doing a lot won't get us there.
This notion of change.
Yeah.
What role can I play?
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
and it's an interesting one to look at, but the Murdoch press years ago came up with 1 degree.
Oh,
And the argument was, if you move a ship by 1 degree, it will go in a different place.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes. It doesn't require a massive change. And it was an
Yeah.
interesting thought. Last question, looking ahead. Renee, you kind of answered the question, but I'll go back to you first anyway. What excites you about the future of sustainable business?
I think it is the future. I think we will need to be sustainable businesses to have long term. You know, I want to be a good ancestor. That's what motivates me every day.
Right.
I want to leave a better planet for the future generations, or, you know, and I think it's good business. To be good business is something we often say in IKEA, and I feel like I'm part of a good business, and we're doing good business, and we can make change.
Karen, same question, but an additional one to it. What would you say to our membership, the BCSD Australia membership, and Australian business more broadly, that they should take away from this discussion? What's the one thing they should be doing right now?
Well, first of all, very similar notion of what excites me. But then I would also say full success for me is about totally integrating sustainability.
Right.
So, you know, so having a seat at the table, but eventually you could argue you don't need a CSO in a role, because it's so well integrated that everybody is talking about it and the entire business knows what to do to lead it. We're a fair way off that now, even at IKEA, but also in many businesses that I talk to. But I would say that's the thing to focus on for the people listening to this, is to really think about how can you speak to your CFO, your CEO, your boards, your stakeholders at a senior level in the same language, like Renee said as well, so that you're not going in waving the big green flag saying, you know, bashing people over the head saying climate, 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 it's the right thing to do.
With the flag.
Yeah, exactly.
With the flag.
Exactly. Yes, it is the right thing to do, but it makes good business sense. So focus on the right language that will appeal to your stakeholders to influence and inspire them. Make sure your vision is clear and stick to your why as well. And that helps you then bring others along with you on the journey.
I like that. Stick to your why. And I think with that, we will say thank you so much to Karen and to Renee for their frankness, actually, in relation to this discussion. Thank you so much for joining us on this discussion of Exchange with BCSD Australia. I'm Andrew Petersen. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in the next session that we have somewhere in the future. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.